Your call has been forwarded to an on.
I had Delta and I was out. I couldn't take my. Let me get in.
Okay, we're getting started right now as we speak. We're excited to welcome everybody into this afternoon session for the benefit of the Office of Personnel Management. What we'll be doing in this session is that while all of our participants are here, the people that are going to be working for OPM to address your online and face-to-face questions, we're going to be upgrading their status to basically co-host status so that they have the ability to turn your microphones on and off at any time.
Yes, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm going to go ahead and merge your call with Kathleen Keelan, who's our Human Resources Director, okay?
Okay.
Let's see, Adrian's joined us. How are you today, Adrian?
Kathleen, are you there?
Where are the other names?
I am here. Okay, Colleen is also on the line.
No, on the sheet.
Good morning, Colleen.
Good morning, Kathleen. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you for asking.
Good. Yeah, we're happy to have you here today over the phone. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick intro before we start with the questions. So my name is Christina Valenzuela, and I'm the Employee and Labor Relations Director for Fleet Readiness Center Southwest. I have Kathleen Keelan on the phone, who's the Human Resources Director. And so you're also interviewing for the...
Hey, Jeff, are we ready?
We're ready. Go ahead.
We want to thank you so much. I'm Michelle Glenn, Senior HR Specialist with the Office of Personnel Management. I have my two colleagues here. Our presentation, what we're doing this afternoon is we are going to be responding to questions and also offering more information based on our morning's presentations. And as I want to repeat again, I want to thank all of my military members, my spouses, who I truly, truly, truly appreciate. As a military spouse myself, when I tell you your talents are needed in the federal government, when I tell you stay persistent, it starts from that right there. I would have never thought that I would be in the position that I'm in. So what I want to do, because I'm going to be sharing and answering your questions based on the actual hiring authority, I want to first start off by talking about a few myths that seem to be going around based on this hiring authority. And I do apologize because I'm going to be reading these because I want to make sure that everyone understands exactly how I'm going to explain what the fact of this myth is. So the first myth, spouses whose eligibility is based on marriage to a service member must relocate with the service member
Doesn't matter.
to his or her duty station to be eligible under this hiring authority. As it was stated by Mrs. Grant Gage in her morning session, this non-competitive hiring authority is government-wide. And the statute has removed the requirement for spouses to relocate with the military member until August 13th, 2023. However, that is under the government-wide non-competitive hiring authority, the one that we're here to talk to you guys about. That is not the same as DOD. They explained that in their presentation because based on their statute, they must implement military spouse preference. Now, under this non-competitive hiring authority, there is no preference that's given. You are basically non-competitive does not mean you don't have to compete for a vacancy. And some people get that a little confused. What it means is you do not have to compete with veterans, but you do have to compete with other individuals. And as far as the military spouse hiring authority, you are only competing amongst military spouses. So military spouses are put on a separate certificate, if you will, that will be shared with the selecting official. And the choices, if a military spouse is selected, your competition, because everyone competes for a position. You don't have to compete as far as a veteran because this authority is afforded for you for that reason. That's where the non-competitiveness comes into play. So I wanted to first clear up with that particular myth that under the government-wide hiring authority, you do not have to relocate with your spouses. It was changed due to that reason, to allow the military spouse to still be able to work even though they're not with that active duty military member. And these are for the spouses that are eligible as far as an active duty, married to an active duty military member. The next myth I wanted to go to is even though spouses are not required to relocate, and these are actually questions that came in from spouses that we have found very valuable. And this is the way that we're providing an answer to those specific questions that come in from military spouses. Even though spouses are not required to relocate, spouses whose eligibility is based on marriage to a service member have 2 years from the date of the service member's most recent PCS orders in order to use their eligibility under this hiring authority. There again, that is a myth only because that was changed with the National Defense Authorization Act of 2017. There was a time initially, this hiring authority has had multiple changes to it since its establishment in 2010. So most recently, it was discovered that it is very difficult. And as a military spouse, and you all know, it is difficult to keep moving from one base to another. And if I'm not hired within 2 years, then I lose my eligibility. So appreciatively enough, and there again, to applaud the administration, that was changed and that was removed. So each time after 2000, and actually the date, I did see that in the chat. So the date currently right now, August 13th, 2023, is when this hiring authority may revert back to the eligibility requiring PCS, or it may not. That decision is based on Congress. So we don't even know that at this particular time, but I wanted to clear up that particular myth. Another myth that is very educational: the unremarried spouse of a deceased service member killed while on active duty, or the spouse of a 100% disabled service member resulting from the service member's active duty service have 2-year limitation. There again, that was changed. The only category of military spouses that have a continuance of this hiring authority would be the category of the 100% disabled, those eligible spouses, and the spouses eligible based on death of the service member. And there again, unless statute changes, the way it stands, come August 13, 2023, everything will revert back to where the spouse will have the PCS. Until then, that's how we're going to proceed. But their legislation is currently being done right now, but we at OPM, we wouldn't have that information. But I just wanted to make sure that my audience did have enough information to go on based on how this hiring authority is used today. There's only one other myth I want to go over, and then I'm going to open it up for any questions that anyone may have for me. And that is going to be there again, I just want to stress this. The non-competitive appointment authority for certain military spouses is the same as the military spouse preference program operated by the Department of Defense. As Ms. Monica Grant Gage gave a comparison, it is not. And I do understand that spouses, it's confusing. But when you see the military spouse hiring path, that means that it is the OPM's, under OPM's non-competitive hiring authority. DOD may or may not use it, but they've already provided exactly how spouses are to apply for their positions. So those are the few myths that I wanted to make sure that my audience had the correct information before we even open up for questions. But now at this time, I do want to turn it over and see what questions you guys have of me. Because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to provide you with the information that you want. Katika, are we ready?
Well, Michelle, I can go into the chat room and read questions if you like. We can get started.
Okay,
anyway.
yes, because I'm looking at them, but they're
Yeah.
popping away too quickly.
Yeah. What is the best document to upload into USA Jobs along with my marriage license to prove I'm a military spouse?
So there again, for current spouses that are married to current active duty military members, that's going to be whatever that documentation and your marriage certificate. For the category for spouses that are 100% based on that disability, then those spouses, you also need to upload the military members documentation, either from the VA or the branch of service. And normally they might have a letter from the branch of service prior to receiving the letter from the VA, because that does take a little bit of time. So those are the documents. It's proving your eligibility. And remember, the eligibility is based on you're currently married to an active duty military member. You are the unmarried widow or widower of a military member who died while serving on active duty. And there again, I want to stress that the death does not have to be combat related. It is specifically the unfortunateness that this military member is deceased, whether it was a disease, whether it was an unfortunate car accident, and then the 100% disability, the spouse of a military member with the 100% disability rating. So your eligibility, if you do not have those documentations when you are applying, as my colleagues will further elaborate, you will find it difficulty, and it's quite possible that you will be rated ineligible because you haven't proven and you haven't met what the vacancy announcement stated.
Okay. This one is kind of long, Michelle, so I'll read it kind of slow. If I'm living in Germany, accompanying my active duty spouse, apply for remote positions, will my physical location being Germany, not stateside, impede me from being considered for a remote role? I think that's kind of agency specific, but go ahead.
It is. So we're going to, I'm going to hope I can cover this because we did receive a lot of questions regarding remote. And yes, remote work is something that the federal government is seeking and pushing. The CDC has provided OPM. We do have guidance on it with our agency partners. However, the decision whether or not a particular position is eligible for remote lies with that hiring agency. So the hiring agency completely determines whether or not, when they announce that job, whether or not it is going to be remote. Right now, we're trying to force them to state, and this is how individuals, are beginning to search for jobs, and we realize that. But there again, that decision is going to be up to the hiring agency. But if you're in Germany, and was the question, Deshaun, was the individual employed in Germany?
Yeah, it looks like they're, let me scroll back up to it. Looks like they're currently in Germany and wanting to, because I had scrolled down to another question. It is. So it says, will my physical location being in Germany United States that impede me from being considered for a remote role. And then they did go on, when I look up remote only locations on USA Jobs and enter Germany, it shows me certain remote jobs. So it makes me think it is okay to apply for those remote roles, even if I live in Germany. So yes, they live in Germany.
Okay, so correct. So a remote job is just that. A remote job is not dependent upon where you currently live. So if a job says it's remote, it means that you do not physically have to report to whatever the permanent duty location is. And I'm going to use myself as an example. I work in Washington, D.C. So for me, if my job became remote and I moved, let's say I moved to Germany for whatever reason. So I'm going to reverse the tables. I'm only going to get paid the locality that I physically live in. So if the job says it's remote and you're in Germany, which means that you're going to remain in Germany is what I'm assuming, then your pay is going to be based on rest of the United States. So you will not receive any specific locality rate wherever you are living. And if that job says remote, that is going to be the GS pay, if you will, that you will receive. So your locality, and let's say your locality is not listed, then you will fall under what's called rest of the United States. So for me right now, even if my job was remote, I'm living in, working in DC. If for whatever reason, because my job is remote, well, maybe a family member is sick, I need to go see my parents, I need to do something, and I move to Ohio because that's where I'm born and raised, well, I won't no longer receive the pay in DC. My pay will be adjusted and I will now be receiving the pay where I'm physically located, which would be in Ohio. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and to just clarify, while there is a pay scale, the federal government has what we call locality pay. And because certain areas are more expensive in terms of living, then those areas may have a little bit, what will pay a little bit more. And again, that is called a locality pay, but we're all a base salary. But again, you get additional money based on the cost of living in that area.
And correct. And you will not receive locality outside of the United States. So there again, just to make that sure, locality is only given inside the United States.
All right.
I have another question for you, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
It says, I am the spouse of an active duty member who is stationed overseas. However, I am a Spanish citizen. We are stationed in Italy. With a green card, would I be able to apply for these jobs? Or do I need a full US citizenship?
Okay, now that I'm going to say it depends. So in the federal government, for positions in the competitive service, the federal government has 3 different services. The competitive service, and that is what this hiring authority is in. The accepted service, and I'm gonna give you an example of an accepted service hiring authority, the Pathways program, the hiring authority for individuals with disability. Those positions are what are in the accepted service. Then we have the senior executive service. So in the federal government, and that's for our high leadership, senior executive service, based on the competitive service, positions in the competitive service require citizenship, unless, and this is where I have to defer to it depends, because it depends on the circumstance, it depends on the job. If there is a provision that, let's use HHS and let's use CDC, and we're talking about a scientific position. In a mission critical position, and there again, it does depend. if an agency cannot find any US citizens that's qualified for a position, then they can come in to OPM, but that's under a special provision. In this particular instance, because this again is a hiring authority that is in the competitive service, if you are a military spouse and you do not have citizenship, then you more than likely, and you're applying for, there again, a position in the competitive service. So it just depends on what type of position you're looking for. But under this hiring authority, you would need citizenship, absolutely. And I'm sorry if I was too long on that, but I just wanted to make sure that it was completely understood. So I'm not saying that you have to be a US citizen for all positions in the federal government. That's not what I'm saying. But for this position, for this hiring authority that is in the competitive service, citizenship is required.
Okay, we have another question. What is the best document to upload into USA Jobs along with my marriage license to prove I'm a military spouse?
Then that's going to be the document that also qualifies you, which would be if you're active, if you're a spouse of active duty military, then you're going to need proof that that military member is currently on active duty. If you are the spouse of a 100% disabled, then the documentation from either the VA or the branch of the military documenting that 100% disability that's based on the reason why that member was retired, released, or discharged. And then documentation for the widow, unmarried widow or widower, documentation that you are currently still married and the military member died while on active duty.
Okay, next question. Since most of the reservist spouse don't have preferred job application, do you have any suggestions?
Well, I'm glad someone asked that question. So the way we're going to be doing it, my colleague, this session is questions based on the actual hiring authority. The questions for resume, the questions based on applying on USA Jobs, we're going to be doing those in, my other colleagues will be answering those particular questions.
Okay. Can you specify what active duty means? If my spouse is in the active duty reserves, do I qualify for spousal preference?
That's a very good question. Very good question. Well, active duty means just that. And I'm not trying to slide away from the question, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a scenario. Because there again, I'm once military spouse, always military spouse. I'm currently married, and my husband, my spouse is a reservist. But now, for whatever reason, they have been activated to active duty. They've been deployed, they're on active duty. What Michelle Glenn is going to say is for those spouses, that is the time that you need to apply. If your reservist spouse is activated to active duty and been deployed, that is your window and your opportunity for your eligibility. Because as a reservist, that's not active duty. But if they are called to active duty, once they're called to active duty, that's your opportunity, and that's where your eligibility would come into play.
Okay. My husband is active duty reservist. We don't PCS. Since I don't qualify based on the current regulations, what suggestions do you have that will afford me the opportunity to let the hiring agency know that I am military spouse, even if I'm not using preference?
Well, that would mean to me, I also want my spouses to know that yes, we have created because we want to employ you. So you do have your own hiring authority, and that's in statute. But also, as a military spouse, you can actually apply you have two opportunities to apply to a vacancy announcement. So most definitely apply to that vacancy announcement that has that green seal, the military spouse seal that lets you know, that hiring path lets you know these are positions that we specifically want to hire military spouses. And any individual can apply for positions that are open to US citizens. So if you are a US citizen, in this instance, as a military spouse, it will give you two opportunities to possibly be on two different type of selection certificates. If there's no veterans, you know, when you apply under a job that's open to the public, then you're competing with our shared veterans. So veterans preference is applied when you apply to a job that's open to all all US citizens. When you apply to a job for specifically as a military spouse, you are not competing with veterans. You're only competing with other military spouses. So veterans preference is not applied. And basically this hiring authority allows military spouses to basically to apply to a job just like current federal employees do. It's just that you are only competing within yourself. Within yourself as military spouses, this is to, you know, to make it simple for you. This is what this authority does for you. You're not competing with veterans. You're not competing with me. You're not competing with individuals who may currently work in the federal government. And even though the job might be open to military spouses, current federal employees, there again, as I mentioned, the selecting official is going to put everyone on their own individual certificate. So if my goal is to hire a military spouse, then although, and there again, we have to remember, public notice is required. There's some individuals, if an agency is recruiting outside their workforce, there's certain things that that agency must do before they can even hire anyone into their workforce. And as a military spouse, although you are given this non-competitive hiring authority, I'm gonna give you an example. So our wonderful veterans who are eligible under the Veterans Equal Opportunities Act, that is a must. So you must allow those individuals to apply. You can't say, I wanna hire a military spouse, but I don't wanna hire or want an individual under the Veterans Equal Opportunity Act to apply. So therefore, it's going to be certain separate certificates. So you can actually get both. You can't bypass this veteran, but you can also say, well, I want to hire this military spouse as well. So it literally depends on how the position is advertised. And I just want to make sure you understand that you can also apply and have two opportunities for the same position if the job is also open to US citizens.
Okay. I'm a nurse. Almost all the jobs for nurses, they don't have military spouse preferred. Is something else other preferred I can apply?
So the position, and as a nurse, and it would depend, so nurses are hired under OPM's government rules, under Title V, and they're also hired under VA's title. I believe it's Title 38. So I'm going to defer on that particular question because the answer would depend, who are you applying to? And it's not that a particular occupation, it's not that this hiring authority lends itself to a particular occupation. It's open for any occupation. It just depends how the agency is recruiting. Mm-hmm. So yes, you could be a nurse and you can see a job, and I guess I don't want to use the VA. I'm going to use someone else, because I would definitely implore that individual to ask that question to VA in their room. But let's say you're applying as a nurse. I'm going to use OPM because we have nurses. Most federal agencies in a federal building is going to have a qualified nurse. it doesn't mean that military spouses can't be hired in the nursing occupation. What it means is that how the agency is advertising and recruiting for this particular job? I hope that sufficed as an answer.
Okay, next question. If I had permanent status for 7 years prior to a break in service more than 3 days, will my SCD be recalculated by the hiring agency?
No, you said the break in service was how long?
For if I had permanent status for 7 years prior a break in service more than 3 days, will my SCD be recalculated by the
No,
hiring agency?
no, it will remain the same.
Okay. I apologize if this has been covered already. I accepted the position using MSP eligibility. We have not PCSD from this area. Not sure if you know what that means.
Mhm.
Can I use the PSP eligibility again since we have not relocated?
So there again, OPM, we will always defer you to DOD when you refer to military spouse preference, because that's something that OPM, we don't have any authority over it. It only belongs to DOD, and it is only applicable within positions for DOD. So that's not a question that OPM can respond to.
Okay. My husband is 100% disability. Do I qualify for spouse preference?
Okay, now that's a very good question as well, because the way that this hiring authority and the statute was written, the 100% disability must be service connected, and it has to be the reason. So the military member would have to been retired, released, or discharged on, let's use yesterday, okay? And it's due to 100% disability. Okay, well, yesterday is when I, as a spouse, became eligible for the hiring authority, but there again, it's about the documentation. So you must have the documentation. The disability must be 100% and be the reason why the military member was released, retired, or discharged. Remember I said this hiring authority has been changed since 2010. This is just a more recent change, because initially in 2010, that's not how the statute was written, but it has been rewritten, and it cannot be an accumulative rating, if you will, meaning my husband or spouse got out with a 75% disability rating, and it's gotten worse, and it's been increased. So years ago that was allowed. Now that everything has been changed, it is specifically that 100% disability has to be the reason, if you will, that military member is no longer in the service.
Okay. If military spouse preference has already been used for applying for one.
Okay, I'm gonna stop right there again. So anything regarding military spouse preference, we're gonna defer that straight to DOD.
Okay.
And I have about 10 minutes left in my session, because what we're doing there again, remember I said we're giving you an overview of what all the presenters at OPM discussed. So I definitely want to be polite of my colleagues' time, and I only have about 9 more minutes. So if we can get to any other ones that we haven't already gone over or already discussed, I want to make sure that everyone feels heard.
I don't think we heard this one. Why has OPM not issued a standard policy or guidance to agencies for terminal leave without pay for PSC military spouses?
Okay, I think I know where this particular question is going. So as a military spouse example, I gave you guys my example of me. I didn't know anything about the government. I started in Mannheim, Germany, a GS3. I mean, I thought I was rich. I thought this was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I was like 21. Well, what I found out, and I would highly encourage, because right now, once you get employed, yes, you're a military spouse, but once you become employed, you are now, you are a federal employee. And if for whatever reason, if you need to relocate, and this is where the remote work will hopefully work, but there again, I remember I said it depends on the hiring agency. You can ask, and I would highly recommend, if you have already been employed as a military spouse and now you have to relocate, I would highly recommend requesting leave without pay. So leave is a whole total different program area in human resources, and it does not have anything to do with any hiring authority. I'm going to use myself as an example. If I was to relocate right now, for whatever reason, although I'm not a military spouse and I have to relocate, if I was to relocate, I would either have to ask my agency to put me on leave without pay, request my job, can you please, is it possible, can you make my job remote? And if those things do not happen, then I would have to search for another federal job. So being a federal employee, leave is totally different. That has nothing to do with hiring, and everyone is afforded the same amount of leave. It just depends on how long you have been a federal employee. So that's nothing that OPM can do, and if it was possible, it would need statute. So we can only make policies based on the laws that Congress approve and sign, the president's executive orders. We just cannot come up with a policy on our own. It has to be based off of something. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, I think this will be the last one, maybe.
Okay.
Can I use military spouse hiring preference in conjunction with a student pathways announcement?
So those will be two different things. And pathways. Okay, so I'm gonna take that question to mean that you didn't mean military spouse preference, because there again, I said that is completely within DOD and DOD only. But so what you're saying is that you're a military spouse, but you're also seeking higher education. So you're also attending college. Well, that also means that you are a student, because there's no age based on the pathways program. But I just want to make the distinguish, because this is a good question. Pathways program is in the accepted service. It's not in the competitive service. And remember, I said this hiring authority, the non-competitive appointment of military spouses, those three categories, this automatically puts you into the competitive service. So as a military spouse, if you are also a student, you can definitely apply to positions that's open on USA Jobs under the Pathways program. So you can be a military spouse and a student. Now, but you wouldn't get, this hiring authority would not be used to hire you. It would be based on the Pathways program. So that's another opportunity to get hired outside of this hiring authority, the non-competitive appointment of military spouses. Do we have any others? I probably got like 3 or 4 more minutes.
I'm at the end of the list. I might go back up to the top, catch some that we didn't catch.
I see someone just put in a chat, can time and grade be waived? That's a good question. No. If you are a current federal employee, so see, there again, time and grade only applies to a current federal employee, meaning current federal right now, right here, today. There's only a few exceptions, but some individuals, you still have to meet time and grade. You still have to be qualified. So a lot of individuals sometimes confuse time and grade and quals because you have to have both of them. But under normal pretense, I'm just going to say, as a current federal employee, you may be qualified based on, I'm just going to choose based on something you did in the military. But if you are right now a current federal employee, under merit promotion procedures, you have time and grade is going to be applicable. Now, I didn't say you can't get a higher grade level. Now, as a current federal employee, if you don't apply to the job as a current federal employee and you apply as, if it's open to all US sources, right? All US citizens, then you're going to be using your past experience. You wouldn't be using your current experience. So I'm just trying, I hope I gave a good window of why and how, yes, you must meet time and grade, and it depends on whether or not it can be waived. Do we have any others? I only got 2 minutes left. I just tried to read what was in the chat and I missed it. It said under what title is waived, but I missed that.
I don't see it.
Oh, for time and grade. Okay, so time and grade is something there again, like I said, if you're a current federal employee, if you're not a current federal employee, then you don't have to worry about time and grade because it doesn't apply to you. You can find that in 5 CFR 3 Part 300. That's where you will find any information related to time and grade.
Okay, Michelle, I don't remember hearing this.
I see this one. Okay, so that's correct. Okay, so as a recent military spouse, if you just graduated, I'm glad someone mentioned that up. I saw that in the chat. Yes, you can also, Pathways have the different programs listed. So you can apply as a recent grad. If you're a military spouse and you just recently graduated, I would highly encourage you to apply both ways. So you can apply to positions that in the competitive service under this hiring authority. And there again, remember, so under recent grads, that's not going to be the same hiring authority as military spouse. But there again, it gives you 2 alternative ways of applying for employment.
Michelle, I'm not sure if you responded to this one or not. I understand I get a one-time offer for PCS. If I decline a position that was received, as I am actively interviewing for another position, what happens? Do I
So there
notify
again,
these agencies?
We're going to defer and please have that particular individual will definitely need to ask that of DOD. Because remember, right now, under OPM's government-wide, under this hiring authority, PCS is off the table. You don't have to worry about that. Your husband, you could be living in Hawaii and your spouse is stationed in DC. You do not have to come to DC. Now, there again, it depends on where's the job listed. So wherever that job is listed, if that job says it can be remote, then that's one thing. You will find that information out from the agency. But under OPM's, this hiring authority, PCS is no longer on the table until, and maybe if it changes, come August 13th, 2003. So we will soon find that out, probably in the coming months. With the 23, we're in 22, No, we're in 23 already. So with I'm just guesstimating, maybe the 2024 NDA might, provide what's going to happen, because that's going to be put out before August of 2023. Well, I do want to say thank you, you guys. I so appreciate you. I really do. I encourage you. And I'm actually going to turn the mic over to Deshaun King, Mr. Sean King. And Deshaun is going to discuss more in detail on USA Jobs. I'm sorry, am I doing, yes, Deshaun, yes.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
you. All right, folks, so I'm back on. So if you have questions about the application process, about the USA Jobs website, I will do my best to respond to your questions. If I need to do a little research, I shall. But let's get started on questions that you may have with regards to the application process. And yes, I will look to the side because I have 3 screens here, and I would just want to bring up the USA Jobs website just in case I need it. Okay. All right, so let's get going, folks, and I'll do my best to respond to your questions. Uh-oh, do we have nothing but pros? Well, let me say this. We did have some questions that were submitted ahead of time. So until we have questions populating in the chat box, I will go to that.
Well, I'll do that because you helped me out. I got you, girl.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
All
so
right,
I'm in the chat now.
Okay, so just
And
stop me. Stop me when you're ready, because I'm gonna read from that list that you sent yesterday, the previous.
Oh, you know what? Or yes, because these questions and that's in the chat right now,
Mhm.
I'm going to defer to Katika and Carol, because like these questions aren't on your session. They're just other questions. And just so everyone know, we will do our very best to make sure all questions are answered, even if it's not during today in this session.
Absolutely.
Like, so this one right here says, I'm a GS5 step 7. Can I apply for a GS7 position? That's going to be, that's the general. So unless you have the specialized experience, and there again, between Deshaun and my other colleague, Mr. Adrian Williams, they'll go over that, and he might discuss some of that in writing your resume. But after the grade 5, what we call time and grade, and I mentioned that in my previous, just a minute ago. So the bottom line is, it doesn't matter about your step. It matters of how long and how much specialized experience you have in that grade and that particular occupation. So example, let's say if this GS5 position is a 201, a HR specialist, then you need to be in that GS5 for at least 1 year, 52 weeks. And that's with any position. So I hope that answered that. It's going to be back to Deshaun on the next. Let me see if I can see anything else. And I'm going to pause for a minute. We're having a little bit technical difficulty. So Katika is in the waiting room and trying to get in.
I'm in Michelle.
Oh, wonderful.
So
She's there. So just let me know if there are other questions in the chat box. Meanwhile, I'll look at the list that was sent yesterday.
Okay.
People sent their questions ahead of time. So one question is, if working a remote job, are government laptops provided? Or will I need to get a CAC reader for my personal computer? No. When you work for the federal government, they actually do not want you using your personal devices. So yes, they will provide, your agency will provide you with your computer equipment, and we all use the PIV cards or CAC cards, some people call them, to access our laptops. So yes, they do provide you with the equipment that you need to do your job. this is a question that comes up a lot. After you apply for a new job, how long does it take for you to hear back from an agency? So that question just depends on the agency and the HR department, because we have some agencies that are large, that have small HR departments, and they could be overwhelmed. So we have some agencies that are very small. They don't have a lot of vacancies that come up. And so those smaller agencies that usually don't have a lot of positions available, they can probably get through that whole application and hiring process within maybe 30 to 45 days. Wherein if you have a huge agency like the Department of Veterans Affairs, I used to work there in their HR department, and let me tell you, we just did not have enough staff where we could have that type of quick turnaround. So again, it just depends on the agency. This is not an OPM thing, this is a Deshaun thing. So when I was in searching for opportunities, once I would apply for a job, let's say the closing date is today, October the 12th. If I don't see a status change of my application in like 2 weeks, because I usually give the HR department about 2 weeks to at least get started working on it, because I know what happens behind the scene. If I don't see an update within 2 weeks, then I use the contact information on the job announcement to reach out to the HR practitioner, say, hey, I applied for this particular job. Here's the job's name, the title, the announcement number. Can you provide me with the status? Especially, but again, use that your track this application feature in the USA Jobs in your account, because it really does give you a live, more up-to-date status of where your application is. But again, like I said, it just depends on the agency, how much work they have, how big they are, how big the HR department is. But if you don't hear about it, so I hear people a lot of times come to my sessions and they say, well, I applied for a job a year ago and I haven't heard anything yet. Folks, you can't wait a year before you start reaching back out to the agency to find out what the status is. So figure out in your mind what works for you, a week, 2 weeks after the closing date. Okay, don't contact them before the job closes or the day or two after it closes, because they've not started looking at that job yet. So give them a little bit of, time in which to begin looking at the application, and then again, use that contact information on the job announcement.
Deshaun, there's a question about what's the best way to find non-competitive announcements. Do you want to save that for Adrian?
Yeah, they're talking about the military spouse. Yeah, let's save that for Adrian.
Okay. And I'm still scrolling through.
While you're scrolling, I have another one. Please discuss the best practices for finding and landing a fellowship or internship position. So here's the deal. The federal government has a program called Pathways. Under Pathways, there are 3 umbrellas, folks. We have the internship program, and I'll just give you a brief overview, but you can always go back to USA Jobs, scroll down to the middle of the page where you see hiring paths that agencies can use. It says explore hiring paths. And we have one that says students and recent graduates. It gives you more details about our student programs. But for our internship program, you have to currently be a student or accepted for enrollment in a qualifying institution. You have to be in school at least half-time or accepted at least half-time in that institution. We don't determine half-time. The educational institution determines what half-time is, okay? So you have to meet that what we call the definition of student in order to be eligible for the internship program. The recent graduate program is just that, for individuals who have recently graduated from a qualifying educational program or institution. And so the recent graduate program is typically a 1-year program, and it's a career development program. There are some agencies and or positions that have 2-year programs, and it's just based off of the agency and or that type of position. But usually it's a 1-year program, development program, and you have to have, again, you have up to 2 years from the date that you completed your degree requirements, not your graduation date, but your degree completion requirements. That's when that's when you start counting those 2 years. And that's why we call that recent graduate. So you have 2 years of eligibility for that program. Then we have what we call our Premier Internship Program, which is the Presidential Management Fellows Program. This is a 2-year leadership development program. And just like the recent graduate program, you have up to 2 years of eligibility for this. For this program, you usually come in at a little bit higher grade level because it is developing you for leadership positions, and you have to have completed at least a master's degree. So this is for individuals who are pursuing professional degrees, a master's degrees and above. So again, go back to USA Jobs, click on students and recent graduates, and then you can get additional information about that. I will also encourage you, if you're looking at certain specific agencies, look on agency websites, because the only internships, if you will, that are required to be on the USA Jobs website are those that fall under the Pathways umbrella. Now, agencies will have other internships and fellowships, apprenticeships. They can have those opportunities on their website. So folks, don't just rely on USA Jobs for these internship and fellowship opportunities. Go to the agency website as well. So that's kind of like in a nutshell for those opportunities.
Deshaun, I put a
Yeah.
link to the student and recent grads information on USA Jobs in the chat. So if you're interested in that, we've got a link for you in the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katika. This is what I'm saying, team play. Do you have any questions, or I'll move on to the
Go ahead and move on to the next one. I haven't found any more
okay.
about applying yet.
Okay, so someone asked the question, just said that they were interested in remote or telework positions. So as you're looking for these opportunities, as I don't know if you were in my session earlier, I showed you how you can look for remote opportunities, but when you apply, are looking for these opportunities, we have what you call filters on the right side of the page. And so as you're indicating the types of jobs that you're looking for, whether it's full-time, part-time, certain agencies, we have a filter for telework and remote as well. And so you can choose remote and or telework so that you can see those opportunities that may suit your needs in terms of, being able to work from home. So the job announcement will absolutely tell you if the job is telework eligible and or remote. Okay. Why am I only qualifying for entry-level positions when I have an extensive education and and experience? So folks, my experience having been in the federal HR for many years is that usually when people have trouble with getting past the HR department, meaning being referred for these positions, a lot of times it's the resume. So I'm going to have ask Adrian if he can expound on that. But usually it's the resume that's hindering you from being able to be referred to the hiring manager for further consideration, because a lot of people don't understand the amount of details that are required when you are applying for federal jobs. We ask for a lot more information than the private sector. And so we encourage, and that's why you're able to have a resume that does not limit you to 1 or 2 pages. So typically there's no limit on the number of pages for your resume, but I will tell you that there are some agencies that may say, in required documents or in their requirements section, it may tell you that, can somebody please mute themselves? But they'll tell you whether or not there's a page limit, because I have seen only one job announcement where the agency limited you to 5 pages. So again, in the federal government, we know we ask for a lot more information than the private sector. So we provide you, the tools in order to do that. So you're able to write that resume that's a bit more detailed. And make sure that you're addressing the requirements of the job. So a lot of people don't look at the specialized experience that's required for the position. And that is crucial when you're writing your resume. And Adrian can touch on that again, but you really, really, really have to address the specialized experience in your resume. So I don't think, Adrian has not been in operations like I have. So I will tell you with regards to the specialized experience folks. So usually what happens in the HR department is that they'll look at whether or not you are eligible for the position, meaning do you fall into that category of this job is open to? Then they'll look and make sure that you have all of the required documents, because what we normally do is go through like a weed out process, because we get so many applications in. We try to weed out those that are not eligible for the position and those who did not necessarily submit all the required documents. Then what we do is look for those who meet the specialized experience for that job. So it's very important for you to address the specialized experience. We encourage you to use the information in the job announcement and that occupational questionnaire. Incorporate that information in your resume if and only if you have that experience. Please do not copy verbatim, but use the terms and the phrases that we have there and expound on your experiences. You want to kind of tell a story. This is what I did. This is how I did it, meaning I use these particular skills or I use these particular systems in order to do my work. Who did you do your work for? Well, I created, so I'll use some of my work. I create information sessions for the public on various topics related to the federal hiring process. So that's what I do. That's who I do it for. I use PowerPoint. Software in addition to presenting using Microsoft Teams and Zoom. That's how I do my work. Okay. And so as a result of this, I was able to educate more than 2,000 people last year on the federal hiring process. So I just told you a story. I told you what I did. I told you how I did it. I told you who I did it for and what was the outcome. And so that always kind of confuses people. How do I demonstrate results in my resume? That's how you do it. You tell the whole story, tell it succinctly, but you still give that whole narrative, if you will, about the work that you performed. Anything yet, Katika?
No, we've got a couple of questions about military spouse eligibility, but we'll save that for, which are probably more Michelle than you.
Okay. Are there positions available in Las Vegas, Nevada? So on the USA Jobs website, you could do a keyword search or you can include a location. So you can put in Las Vegas, Nevada. But let me say when you, and then you can expand your search to include maybe 50 miles outside of Las Vegas. So yes, you can narrow your search down to a certain area. When you do that though, folks, just keep in mind that let's say that you indicate that you don't want to go more than 10 miles outside of Las Vegas. Well, what if there's a job that's 15 miles outside of Las Vegas? You just missed out on that opportunity. So think a little strategically when you are, including your filters as you are looking for these opportunities. But yes, we have jobs in the federal government that are nationwide and also overseas. So you can find those opportunities on the USA Jobs website. Let's see here.
There's a question about remote opportunities available in Alaska. I'm going to say the same would apply. You're going to search, you do your location. When you filter your search, you can filter by location. You can also filter by telework or remote opportunities. One thing to remember is that USA Jobs is a dynamic system. Agencies are adding new announcements every day. Announcements are closing every day. One of the things that you really want to do is create that profile in USA Jobs, and you can save a search. So if you do a search, like you've set up the search, you've got all your filters, you can save that search, and then you can get notifications based on that search at any time frame you want, every day, once a week, once a month. That's another good tool that help you find and look for positions, because the announcements in USA Jobs are changing literally every day, probably multiple times an hour.
Yep. We have a question. If your disabilities accommodations were to telework, do you note disability on a job you apply for that is remote? So if a job is remote, you really don't, if a job is open to individuals with disabilities and you want to use that hiring authority, yes, you need to submit the required documents for that. Now, I am a person who is remote based on disability. And so I did have to provide certain documentation to my supervisor, and my agency had to approve it. Now, will they provide you with, will they accommodate you? So yes, they will. My supervisor approved a certain desk and chair for me and other equipment so that I can perform my duties. Now, let me say this. A lot of people think that they are entitled to a federal job, even if they have a disability. Yes, we do not discriminate, but folks, you have to be mindful. You have to be able to perform the essential functions of the job in order to be hired for that position or to maintain that position. Okay, so for instance, if your job requires running and you're in like me, I can't run. So if the job requires running and I apply for the job and it tells me in the requirements that the job requires running, and I apply for the job, they interview me and then they want to see me run. And I say, well, I can't run. They are not required to hire me because I don't meet the requirements for the job, because then that's an essential function of the job. So just be mindful of that when you're looking at those opportunities. But yes, we do accommodate individuals. But again, that's an agency issue. You'd have to apply for accommodations through your agency. Katika, you had something?
Yeah, I got a couple more questions. How likely are resumes viewed when marked searchable? And I can answer that if you don't know.
Go ahead, go ahead.
So the searchable resume feature is there so that on the agency side, on their side of the system, they will, when they need to. So let's say an agency has to hire quickly, they need to hire 50 accountants or program managers. What they do with that searchable is they go in and they look for people who've marked their resume searchable who were interested in accounting jobs. They'll get a list and then they can use that list they'll use that list and they'll send everybody that popped up on that list an email to say, hey, we're filling accountant positions. You are interested in accountant positions. Might you want to use it? There, I don't have it. The last time I talked to USA Jobs teams, they didn't have any real statistics on how often it's used, but we do highly recommend it because when agencies are actively recruiting, they use it as a tool to be able to reach out to applicants who are interested in the types of positions that they are filling. So for instance, you can only have one resume that's searchable in USA Jobs. For instance, my resume, even though I'm not actively looking for a job, I still have my resume marked as searchable. So we highly recommend it. And then we have another question.
Okay.
What is the best step to take if you have private sector experience, but you're looking to get your foot in the door on the federal side? If you aren't sure what positions best equate to your experience as far as meeting specialized experience, where is the best place to start?
So, well, you need to start by thinking about what type of job you're interested in. And what you could do is go online on USA Jobs and pull up that type of job. And most of the jobs in that family will probably have many of the same requirements in terms of skill sets and things of that nature. So look and see what skills are required, if there's any educational requirement, things of that nature, and see if you actually meet the requirements of the job. And you can kind of get a sense for whether that's a type of position that you may be qualified for in the federal government. But the first step is to think about what it is that you want to do. Folks, you also need to be mindful that job titles don't tell the whole story in the federal government. While my job title now has been for a while an HR specialist, I'm no longer in operations where I actually, post the job announcements and review them, what have you. I take the technical knowledge that I have now and I educate people about the hiring process. So while my title is HR specialist and I'm not doing that specialist work, if you will, I'm educating people about it. And so they could easily call me a trainer or a recruiter, because I perform a lot of recruiters duties and things of that nature. So be careful about just scrolling through job titles, because you may be able to do that job, but because you bypassed it based on a title, you may have missed out on an opportunity. So, at least scan through the job the duties of the positions and kind of get a sense for what the job entails and make a determination as to whether it may be something that you could be qualified for. And also I want to say this, I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and I've talked to people who, when they read the qualification requirements for the jobs, they basically disqualify themselves. They're like, oh, well, you know, I have most of this experience, but I might be missing one or two pieces of this, so I guess I'm not qualified for the job. Folks, if you think you are qualified for the job, apply for it. Let the HR department do their work. So I've talked to people that say, well, you know, I looked at the specialized experience and I had everything but one little piece that was in there. Apply for the job, folks, and let HR do their work. Okay, don't disqualify yourself. But if you know, like I know I will never qualify for an IT position. Can you please, thank you. Just like I know I'm never going to be qualified for an IT position, I'm just not going to waste my time doing that. But if you feel like you may be qualified, especially after you read that job announcement, just address the requirements of the job and what have you the best you can, and apply for the job. Just don't miss out on opportunities because you did not apply. All right.
All right, we got another question.
Okay.
It's a two-parter.
Mhm.
Is there a preferred format for the resume, paragraphs, bullets, combination, etc.? And then regarding the format, are there ways to make it read easier for HR specialists to view the qualifications and experience?
So Adrian can talk about the first part of that, but as an HR practitioner, I'm going to talk about the second half. Because the resume is his, and I don't want to, you know, overstep my boundaries. But yes, there is a way when you're writing your resume, and I'm speaking from an HR perspective, you could write in bullet format or you can write in narrative. But whatever you do, folks, maintain consistency when you're writing your resume. I've seen some resumes that would almost give you a headache because they kind of jump all over the place. So be consistent, make sure that you kind of guide the reader when you're writing your resume. And what do I mean by that? Let's say, for instance, that, and I'll use human resources because it's a great position for this type of example. So let's say that, you know, you're applying for an HR position and the manager really wants somebody who is strong in what we call position classification, but you were a generalist, meaning you have experience, you're an expert in position classification, employee relations, and staffing and placement. So what you can do is take your major duties, folks. So I'm going to take my staffing and placement information and recruitment and placement, I'm sorry, and I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to bold that section. Recruitment and placement. And then I'm going to detail my duties and that I performed under that major duty. So what tasks did I perform under recruitment and placement? Announce the positions, review resumes for qualifications, all that sort of thing. Now, then I would take my next bold or italicized, underline, whatever. I'm going to skip down to another paragraph. There's going to be a space in between, okay? And then I'm going to say employee relations. That's another major duty. And so from that, I would detail my tasks related to employee relations. And so you can kind of guide your reader, and it's very helpful when you do that, because then people can really find the information that they need, that they're looking for in your resume a lot easier. If you're uploading your resume, please use at least 12 font. I've seen resumes at 10 and 9 font, and there was just no way I could read it. So make sure that it's easily read when you're writing your resume. So yes, there's a way that you can formulate your resume to make it easy to read. I don't know if you all, Michelle, if you can answer this, if we provided them with the resume handout. If not, we can make sure that we get that in during Adrian's session. Right after myself, my colleague Adrian Williams will come on and answer questions about the resume, and I can make sure that you all get a copy of this resume handout. So it provides you with details on what it is that you should be looking for and how to, write your experiences.
All right, so we got another question. What if I have government and private sector experience? Can I apply for a job that is greater than my current government grade? Or do I have to continue to move up in grade order?
So if you're a current federal employee, you must meet your time and grade in order to be promoted. So if you're a GS 11 and you're looking at a GS 13, you have to meet the time and grade at the GS 12 in order to get to that 13. Now, what I know some people have done is they will leave the federal government and go, let's say somebody at the GS 11, they want a higher grade in the government, but their position doesn't go any higher, but they find another opportunity outside of the federal government. And the experience is at a different level. It's at a higher level that will help them qualify for a higher grade level in the federal government. They have to have at least 1 year performing at a higher level, okay? Then they come back to the government and say, hey, I have this this higher level experience. I'm going to apply for this GS 13 or 14, whatever it is that they think they're qualified for. If their experience is at the level that is required for that job, then they can go to that higher grade level. But as a current federal employee, you cannot be promoted beyond the next grade level if you have not met the time and grade requirement. So you have to be that GS 11 for 52 weeks in order to be eligible, because you always have to be eligible first, folks. You have to meet the time, and you have to be in that grade 11 for 52 weeks in order to be eligible for the GS 12 level, okay? Oh, somebody just asked that question. Oh, that's for Adrian. How can I transfer from one agency to another, especially when the announcement says internal only? So folks, that goes back to that eligibility requirement. So on the job announcement on the left-hand side at the beginning, it says this job is open to. If it says that the job is open to and it says internal to agency and you don't work for that agency, folks, you are not eligible for that job. So if you apply for it, you're going to get notification back that you are ineligible. They're not going to consider you for the job, even if you're one of the best qualified candidates, because they want to hire somebody who is internal to the agency. Okay. I'm scrolling through some of these other questions. Some of them are repeats, so I'm just.
Yeah.
If you apply to so if you apply to a job opening on USA Jobs, how is your application considered compared to others that apply? So everybody is looked at the same way. You have to respond to the occupational questionnaire, and if you're in the best qualified category, they are going to review your application materials just like they're going to review everybody else's. If after reviewing your application materials or your resume, they determine that you are not one of the best qualified, they're going to remove you from that group of best qualified candidates. But there are no special ways that you can navigate this process other than to go through the process just like everybody else. I appreciate once the government changed their method of reviewing applications and what have you, because it is a lot more fair than it used to be. So everybody that's looking for that opportunity has to apply for the job just like everybody else.
And Deshaun, let me just add. So there again, Deshaun mentioned you being best qualified, and that is basically true for a lot of other hiring authorities. However, under this non-competitive appointment for military spouses, you do not have to be best qualified at all. You just have to meet the minimum qualifications This is another thing that this hiring authority lends for you. So you're not competing among best qualified like I would, or Deshaun, or any other current federal employee, not under this hiring authority. You are again competing with each other. So any other military spouse, that's who you're competing of. I want you to think of it like that. Okay, sorry, Deshaun. I just wanted to make sure that they knew for this hiring authority, you don't have to be best qualified.
No. Thank you. No, this is what this tag team, this team effort is all about, Michelle. I appreciate that.
So we got another question, which is non-appropriated fund experience considered federal experience?
I'm not sure what that is. So.
Yes.
I am, so I can answer it. So,
Okay.
So in DoD, there are positions that are called non-appropriated fund positions. They are in the accepted service. So and NAF positions are a little different than other positions. And sometimes you can be in an NAF position and it is a federal position. And sometimes you're in an NAF position and it's not a federal position. I would say if when you were in that NAF position, you got an SF-50, a standard form 50 to document your employment, you are considered a federal employee. So regardless of whether you are a federal employee or not, when you are applying to positions as an HR specialist, I am required to look at all of the qualification information that you provide me, both private sector and public sector, and even volunteer experience. It's very important. If you volunteer for an organization, you volunteer in any sort of way. Maybe you are a stay-at-home parent and you're not working for a paid job, but you have volunteer experience. You want to include that volunteer experience in your resume so that the HR specialist and the hiring manager can see all of your experience and appropriately evaluate your qualifications. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Is the federal workforce moving towards and more supportive of remote working in this new environment? Absolutely. The federal government is pushing more and more for telework. We have a lot more remote positions than I've ever seen in my years of being in the federal government. And so, yes, the answer to that question is just that, yes, we're moving to more telework and remote positions. Someone says, why is USA Jobs posting fake jobs that are misleading to veterans and spouses and are leading to numerous scam job offers? We do not post fake jobs on USA Jobs. I don't know what this individual is talking about, but we do not do that on the federal government, on the USA Jobs. The only people who have access to our postings are our federal HR practitioners. And so I don't know where that question came from, but we don't do that. And if a job is listed on USA Jobs, folks, the agency is actively recruiting for that position. If for whatever reason, an agency needs to cancel a position, sometimes maybe the funding was pulled for a position or what have you, then notification will go out that the job was canceled. But other than that, what you see on USA Jobs, they are actively recruiting for that position. Is volunteer service listed on a resume seen as true work experience? I'll answer that very quickly. The answer is yes. It does not matter that your experience is paid or non-paid experience. What matters is whether or not you have the experience and or the skill sets that the hiring agency is looking for to qualify for the position. Trying to see, I don't see any other, do we have any other questions related to the hiring process, the application process?
So here's a general one. When applying for a position, should I change the how did I hear about this position change from USA Jobs website to job fair?
I mean, you can, the folks in the HR department is not going to see that. That's really for our USA Jobs team because they collect statistics on how people learn about our positions in the federal government. So yes, you can feel free to do that. The nice thing about the USA Jobs system, you could change your information anytime you like, how often you like. So if you found out about a position one way and another one another way, you can feel free to change that however you choose. Absolutely. Can I get a job with an associate degree in accounting? So it depends on the qualification requirements for the job. Now, I do know for accounting position, there is what we call a positive educational requirement. It means that you have to have specific education and it has to be a certain amount. And oftentimes you can combine education with experience. But folks, this goes back to reading the qualification requirements in the job announcement because it is very specific in explaining what the qualification requirements are for each job that you pull up. And that includes any student positions, because I see a question that's kind of related about a student position. Same thing about student positions. They're going to ask you certain, there's certain criteria that you have to meet. So please take your time, read that information correctly. I noticed that a lot of times when people see jobs that have a positive educational requirement and experience, sometimes they'll read education and experience when oftentimes it says education or experience or a combination of both. So just take your time, read this information carefully. We don't want you to miss out on these opportunities because you didn't take your time to read this and understand the information that's in that job announcement. Okay. Michelle, you might want to answer this one. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay, one says, is it true that if I got a federal job that I will be transferred to another location and keep it if my spouse PCS? I don't know if you answered that one earlier.
Say,
You want to read it again?
so I think I understand it. I think I understand it. So as a spouse right now, you're a military spouse and you currently already are federally employed and your mate, your military member is PCSing. Does that mean you get to take your job with you? No, that is not what that means. So there again, as an example, I give this recommendation and I highly recommend this for my spouses that are going to be relocating. You can simply request leave without pay from your agency. So, and it really is not going to hurt them because you might decide to come back. That's what leave without pay would afford you. You would not lose your federal job, but no, you can't take it with you and leave DC because now we got PCS orders and we are in California. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it did.
Someone's asking about what an accepted service position is. Do you want me to explain that?
Sure.
Yes, why don't you?
Okay. All right. So in the federal government, we have the competitive service and the accepted service. The competitive service are positions in executive branch agencies. So, you know, 3 branches of government: executive branch, judicial branch, congressional branch. Competitive service positions are in the executive branch. Accepted service positions are in the other 2 branches and some in the executive branch. But competitive service positions are filled using rules under Title V of the US Code, and accepted service positions follow different rules. And so when you're on USA Jobs, there is the federal employees hiring path. There's one that says federal employees - competitive service and one that says federal employees - accepted service. The military spouse authority is going to be, you'll see that icon generally with the positions that are listed in the competitive service. An accepted service position is still a federal position. They just use different rules for hiring. If you're searching on USA Jobs as a military spouse and you find a position and it says, generally for accepted service positions, it'll say federal employees accepted service, it'll be open to all US citizens. If you're qualified for that position, you should still go ahead and apply for it. Just know that there are some positions that are in the competitive service and some positions are in the accepted service. The biggest difference between the two is the rules that we apply when we make selections. But you should apply to any position which you're qualified for that is either marked with that military spouse icon or open to US citizens icon.
But there again, this hiring authority is only in the competitive service. So it would not be listed in the accepted service.
Right. Okay, folks, so that is my time. We're going to pass the mic over to Adrian Williams. And he's going to answer questions that you have about your resume when you're applying for these federal positions. Thank you all for participating.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes.
So folks, if you have questions about the resume, please put them in the chat box. Adrian, I do have some on the list from yesterday, so I can, we don't have any in the chat.
Well, I do have a couple. I have a couple from the chat.
Okay, good. Okay.
So the first is about formatting. Is there preferred format for the resume? Like, should I use paragraphs? Should I use bullets? A combination? You know, is there preferred format?
First off, can everybody hear me? Can you hear me, Katika?
I can hear you.
Okay, just want to make sure.
I can hear you too, dear.
Okay. The format is a personal choice. I really do think it's personal choice. What I pretty much would tell somebody, don't use what I've seen where you just put all your information in a big giant paragraph. I use what we call a paragraph bullet kind of format where I give an overall synopsis of what my job is and how I perform my jobs. And then underneath that, I put the accomplishments that I had in the job. And one of the things that from one of my teammates, I've learned what you can do, the core competencies that when you're reading how you're going to be evaluated is that in each one of your jobs, there's core competencies. I think in the presentation I had, like your technical skills, oral communication, detail, accuracy, detail, and the different kind of core competencies, you can actually put them in each one of your jobs and how you performed and kind of highlight those accomplishments. So somebody, if they're looking for attention to detail, they can see, okay, here's your attention, here's how you performed accomplishments to attention to detail. Or if you have your technical skills, here's your technical skills and what you did that would align with your technical skills in your job. So it's a personal choice. There's no right or wrong. What they do prefer is reverse chronological order is the main thing that you actually put in there, and that you make your resume readable. You can actually go in, you can look at your accomplishments, you can look at what you've done, how you've done it, and the results you produce. But that format is pretty much a personal choice that, you know, some people like the bullet, some like the paragraph, but it's just one of those things that kind of go through the process and see which one is working better for you.
All right, so we got another question. Under education, if you include more information like projects and classes, is that considered for qualifications?
Yes, ma'am. I tell any student that because you may not have a lot of experience, but you have projects, you have projects that you've done in your classes, make that read like it was a job. And, you know, you can still say, this is what I did, this is what we needed to do, and this was the final outcome from it. You're putting it in an educational kind of format, but it is education, it is experience that you actually acquired over that time frame. So it's just making it look like you are working, that you are doing something. And those projects do count when you're trying to build a platform to say, I am a qualified candidate, especially if you're applying under educational or someone that does not have a wealth of experience so far.
All right, so we got lots of questions for you, Adrian. So here's another one.
Yes.
Related to format. Does summary of qualifications count, or is qualification and KSA straight from the job experience?
Can you say that one more time, ma'am? I'm sorry.
I think they're asking, if I do a summary of my qualifications, is someone going to look at it? Or are they only going to look at the qualifications I list under the specific jobs?
Where do you follow through?
You want me to take that, Adrian?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so your summary of qualifications,
Okay.
They are not used to determine your qualifications in the HR department. Primarily because remember that for federal government jobs, you have to have either education or a certain amount of experience. If that experience is not listed under a job that has the start and finish month and year for those positions and the number of hours that you spent, that you work per week, we can't calculate the amount of time that you spent using those skill sets or performing those duties. So we will not use your summary of qualifications to determine your qualifications. They have to be listed under a particular job, and that job has to indicate the month and year, start and finish. If it's a current position, you put your month and year that you started, and your end date is present or current. And still, don't forget the number of hours that you work per week. Okay, and so I hope that answers the question.
And I want to I see a question, and I want to read this. There's now a process for plagiarizing summaries copied straight from the job announcement. I've heard people doing and getting a job from this. I would honestly say, please don't do that, because the people you're dealing with, they're the ones that wrote the job announcement. If you're just going to cut and paste the job summary into your job, into what you've done, I've had friends do it, and then they wonder they're not getting any callbacks. That's going to be, that's why. Now, I don't know of anybody who's gotten a job, because I always hear, well, I heard somebody, well, you know, I have never heard anybody doing that and actually getting a job that they really wanted. And then if they do, when they want to move up, you're still going to have to build your resume and talk about what you did, how you did it, and how you want to move through this process. So I would say don't do that. Do not just copy and paste from a job announcement into your resume.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yes.
I've seen at my last agency where an individual, they didn't necessarily copy and paste from the job announcement, but they used a lot of the information that was in the job announcement and they made it their own. They interviewed well, was selected for the position. They could not perform the duties of the position and was terminated. So folks, if you don't have that experience, that's why I said earlier, if and only if you have that experience included in your resume, make it your own, tell your own story as it relates to those experiences and the skill sets. But like Adrian said, I would not encourage you to copy and paste from the job announcement. If somebody got a job that way, that was a fluke. So would not recommend that.
So I've got another question in the chat, and it's about foreign education. I'm not sure which one of you wants to answer it. If not, I can probably try to answer it. So their question is
this the one about the Canadian federal government?
No, they went to school in Mexico, say, or if I went to school in France. My degree is not from a U.S. institution. What do they need to do on their resume or in their application to make sure that the agency is able to evaluate it?
Integrity, honesty, and follow through.
Can we please ask only the speakers, if you're a participant, because someone has their mic off and we can hear you.
I think I can answer that. And when you are actually have a foreign diploma, there is a link that you can go to, and we can actually find that link, and I'll try to find it, that you can actually and get your degree looked at by US standards. So that's one thing that you have to do, because just because some degree programs from other countries do not hold the same educational equivalent of the US schools. So you would have to go and get your education certified, verified and certified to what it does equate to in a US, from the US educational programs. And I don't know, Katika, do you know that link?
I am finding it now. I just found the link on USA Jobs. So I'm going to provide in the chat a link to some information in USA Jobs Help Center, and it has a link. So basically, essentially, if you have a diploma from a U.S. institution, it has to be an accredited institution. And they were called accreditation services that will look at your education from that foreign country and determine if that degree is equivalent to a degree from an accredited U.S. occupation, U.S. School. And so there's more, I'm going to provide, I just put a link in the chat to give you more information on how that works. But essentially, you would send your information to this accreditation service, and they're going to evaluate the information about your degree from the foreign institution and compare it to American educational standards to see if it meets those accreditation requirements. I hope that makes sense. And if you've done that process of degree equivalency, you might want to note on your application or resume that, you know, accreditation information is available upon request, something like that. Sometimes in the announcement, like they will, especially if the position is, if it's a position where a degree is required, they will speak to that, to having that, submitting that accreditation information with your application. So just, again, make sure you read all the information in the announcement. So we got another question, which is, what is the resume length recommended?
As I said, when it's going to really depend on the job announcement and the job you're actually applying for. When I was referring to going through the normal length, maybe 3 to 5 pages is the normal federal resume, because the key thing is you're trying to justify I'm the best qualified applicant, and you're trying to add detail. You're just not giving bullets. You're basically saying, yes, I did it. This is how I did it, and here's the results. And you're trying to give information to show that I'm targeting myself to meet the qualifications for this job. The budget and the job that I showed here during the presentation today, when I was looking at it, it had maybe 10 core competencies that they wanted you to address and talk about in your resume. So your resume may be a little bit longer. It also depends on a lot of times when you're looking at the GS level, or if you're trying to add all of your information. Some people, I know, they try to add 20 years of experience, which is going to make their resume enormous, but you do not have to do that. What you need to do is focus in on the qualifications, the duties that the job is asking you to see if you can do, and you want to make sure that you can, as you write it out, draft and craft it, you can address each one of those areas. You can address it with clarity, concisely, and provide the information that is required. So no, the resume does not have to be 7 or 8 pages. Like I said, 3 to 5 pages, you're focusing. It's a targeted resume that you're trying to just show what you can do, how you can do it, and results you can produce. And I said, we go back from current date to 10 years. If you want to add extra time, you can. But I would not go to writing a 12-page resume or 15-page resume, which I have seen. You want to keep it short, concise, to the point, and answering the question, but make sure that you're doing it so in a manner that makes you you're showcasing you to be the best applicant for this position.
All right, so we got another couple of questions about including volunteer service on the resume.
Yes, ma'am.
And so the questions are, what needs to be included? Volunteer time to be relevant to qualification? Is there a certain number of volunteer hours that is equivalent to a year of actual work in that field, for instance?
And I think, okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. We'll do it as 2 parts. So answer that part.
I think when Deshaun was talking about it, when you're actually putting in the hours for any kind of job, 40 hours is considered full-time work. 20 hours is considered part-time work. So any hours below that, you have to understand, if it's 1 year of specialized experience, if you did volunteer work for 2 hours at 20 hours a week for that time frame, you are now qualifying for that 1 year specialized experience. If it's underneath that time, you're going to have to, it's going to be hard for you to justify for that 1 year specialized experience unless you have other experience that's going along with that. So it's one of those things that when you use the resume builder, I said, that's why I say use the resume builder, because it makes you input information that is relevant and that the agencies are looking for when you're talking about what kind of experience you bring. So whether it's volunteer experience or whether it's non-paid or paid experience, using resume builder, it's letting you input information in a context and in a way that the agencies can read that information. And that's why I said, use it initially, Once you're done with that, you can print off your resume and you can twist it, turn it, manipulate it, reformat it how you want it. But using that resume builder is such a great tool when you're first starting this, so you can make sure you're putting in the correct information. And again, hours count. 20 hours and below, that's considered part-time. 40 hours and above, that's considered full-time to meeting that 1 year specialized experience when you're putting in the hours. And that's one of the things where agencies are asked, well, almost when you use the resume builder, saying put that information in there.
Okay, and so then the next question is, the question is, I've done AmeriCorps service and I typically include it under professional experience. Should I separate it and put it under volunteer experience?
Was it paid or non-paid?
AmeriCorps, I think, is considered volunteer.
Here, okay. So if it's not
Oh,
paid, then-
they get a stipend and an education award. There's
okay. I would actually put it under just real-time work. And like I said, I guess what I'm trying to stress, what you're looking for is paid and paid experience can be looked at the same way. If you have experience in a non-paid environment, but you meet and overly achieve in all the areas, you could be better qualified than somebody that got paid for it. So what we really stress and what they stress in the job announcement, put both your paid and unpaid experience in there. They will count equally as long as you say, I've done this at this level. This is what I've done. This is what I did. And here's the accomplishments I can showcase. Then you're going to get as much credit for that unpaid experience as you did the paid experience as you go through this process.
All right, so I'm not sure if this is going to be for Adrian or Deshawn. The question is, if a service member veteran is applying for a government job, would they include rank on their experience for each experience? So I'm guessing if, I spent 5 years as a sergeant, and then I don't remember, if I spent a couple of years as a private and then I was a sergeant, do I delineate my rank each of the positions when I'm doing?
I'm gonna just chime in and say yes.
I'm just making up ranks here because I don't remember what they are.
So I would say yes, because like as far as in the military, whether you are an E5, E6, E7, there is a way, depending upon your description, that you could meet the specialized experience as far as it relates to the GS. There's no magical number or no scale, but you identifying, because if I'm not mistaken, and Adrian, you can just also chime in, at a staff sergeant, that's leadership. You're considered to be a leader. Well, I think you're a leader as a sergeant.
You are a leader as a sergeant because that's a non-commissioned officer.
Right. So therefore, my point is absolutely include your rank, because that's going to also lend to your specialized experience, and you have proven it because you have been in that rank. So again, Deshawn just said, yes, that is considered non-commissioned. That is leadership. You're already proving your leadership skills right there. And you're furthering proving your leadership skills if you are an E7. That shows that you have more responsibilities.
And I would also say a lot of times when your rank changes, what the work that you do changes, and you want to be able to show the progression in your work. And so if you're doing one thing at one rank, but you're doing something at a different rank, you're probably going to want to list them separately so that we can see the difference between what you're doing, what the type of work you're doing at the different ranks, if that's a consideration as well. Yeah, I think we have another question. Just a second. Let's pull up my list. Where did it go? Sorry, I got lost on my list. So there's a couple of questions asking about if I have a degree and X number of years of experience, how do I pick the perfect general schedule level to select? Do either one of you want to?
So I'll take that. So here's the deal. So if you have a degree and you have this experience, what I recommend people do, especially if you're not familiar with the GS pay scale, put in the salary range. I demonstrated this earlier. When you're applying for jobs and you're putting it, including the filters, indicate the salary range that you are looking for. And then you'll see the different grade levels populate based off of the salary range, and you kind of get an idea of the grade levels that you should be looking for. That kind of helps to guide people to understanding the different levels that they may be qualified for, I should say.
This is, I think, a good place as a side note. I just seen something pop through. So although we're talking about GS grade levels, as Katika and myself, Deshaun and Adrian stated, we're talking about GS positions under the general scale. Now you have many agencies that is also under what is called pay band. So the job might not say it's a GS 201 grade 12. It might say it's a GA 0201 04. But based on the salary, it is you can obviously see it's nothing like a GS4. And then, but in that instance, there again, the agency will explain what qualifications and what type of experience you need. So it could be difficult in trying to ascertain, well, what grade level, should I start out? But if I'm not mistaken, under most 2 grade level positions, you can minimally qualify with a bachelor's degree. Is that not correct, Deshaun and Adrian?
So the grade levels that you're going to qualify for with a bachelor's degree, I think a GS5 to a
GS7.
7. And then with a master's degree, you would have to have, and you can qualify at the GS9, excuse me, and what, some 11 positions?
No,
Right.
yeah.
No, and then for what's that, doctoral degree from you may be qualified for a GS11 position.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't think.
No, but again, you have to
education is
read.
used-
You have to read the qualification requirements section, folks. That's why I keep stressing that. And I don't mean to beat that dead dog to death, but a lot of people just don't go back and really pay attention to that. So it's really important that you read that qualification section.
Right. And remember, when you're looking at that qualification section, for some positions, you must have a degree, right? And so
Right.
we call those considered positive education positions. Those are positions like nurses, doctors, accountants, engineering, acquisition type positions. And then for other positions, you can qualify based on education or experience. And so when you look at the qualification requirements in the job announcement, it'll tell you if you have to have a degree or if a degree is optional. When the degree is optional, it's going to it'll list both the amount of experience or the education that you have. And so you're going to compare that to also look at that definition of specialized experience and try to figure out, do I have the skills and competencies that they're looking for? And it's a yes or no answer. There's no perfect answer. The answer always depends on the position. But that's sort of how that works. So the next question is, for the supervisor information on the resume, that is considered is that considered for reference? Does it have to be a supervisor, or can anyone that knows you and can speak to your character? So I guess they're wondering, a lot of times I know in the USA Jobs profile, when you use the resume builder, you can put in the supervisor's name. So I guess they're wondering whether or not that alone is sufficient for references, or if they can use other people for references.
When I was going through this, I pretty much attempted to always put the supervisor. If you don't have the supervisor, a lot of times they may just be verifying if you work in that location. So your references are your references and your supervisor is your supervisor. You should make a distinction between those two. When you are actually completing your resume builder, you have an option to say, no, I do not contact my supervisor until I give you the authority to do so. So they don't have to. If you don't want your supervisor to know anything until you're ready to leave or make that move, you can actually push do not contact supervisor in that box in the resume resume builder. But if you're going to like I said, your reference is your reference, your supervisor is supervisor, make the distinction. between the two of them. And if somebody needs to talk to your supervisor, let them talk to your supervisor. Do not shortchange yourself or get yourself kind of wrapped up in something that can backfire on you by not giving the right information of who is your supervisor.
Okay, I'm just scrolling back through to see if there are any any more resume specific questions that I missed. Oh, here we go. Are awards, military training, and courses looked at in a resume?
Yes, they are. There are some awards that when you're actually applying for your resume and you're applying under certain circumstances for veterans, some kind of veterans preference, you have to have certain awards and decorations. Some of the certifications that you have, like if you have a PMP certifications in IT, there's certain certifications that they will look at and you will get credit for. So when you're going through this, you're trying to paint the best picture you possibly can, and you want to bring everything to the table that you can and you will be able to look at. Awards, kind of example, I was in recruiting. I was a top performer in recruiting. If I can say I got an award for being a top rated recruiter out of maybe top 5 out of 500, that's an award that you're putting in there. If somebody's looking at that recruiting, that's going to make a difference as people look through your awards, your decorations, any certifications you have. So again, you're putting your best foot forward, and you want to give everybody everything you can to make a determination on why you are the best candidate for this position.
All right. So not sure how we'll answer this one, but what volunteer entities have you seen that have the most seen the most in resumes you have reviewed?
So that question is kind of hard to answer, folks,
Yeah.
because there are so many agencies with so many people applying to these jobs. So that's kind of hard to say. We don't keep statistics on, you know, what volunteer agencies people work for. All we care about is whether or not you meet the qualification standards for the position.
And then the next question we just got in is, would you submit a resume in Word or PDF, or is it based on what is on the job announcement?
Well, for me, what I did when I did this, I built everything in a Word. When I applied for jobs, I always used a PDF. I say a PDF because a lot of times when you are putting a Word document, if you've ever applied at Indeed or some of these other like Monster, Indeed, or some of the other job platforms, when you put a Word document, it can actually mess up the formatting. So what you want to do is when you're applying using a PDF, you're knowing that I printed this, it's stored as a PDF. So when I apply, nothing's going to change on it. The document is the document, it's the document. The formatting is the formatting. And that's why we always stress, check the spelling, check the grammar, make sure it's formatted right. So when you save it, nothing's going to change. And you can just say, okay, I've applied for the job and I do not have to worry about the formatting of this document when it goes forward.
See,
Here's a question I say, Deshaun, this will be a great one for you to answer. Is there any insight on how the best qualified are selected? Curious on the next step after they've been referred.
Say that again?
What is any insight on how the best qualified are selected?
Well, the best qualified are selected based on the information that you provide when you are when you respond to the occupational questionnaire, and then after a review of your resume to ensure that you are in fact one of the best qualified candidates. And again, this goes back to your being able to address the qualification requirements that are listed in the job announcement. And so the HR practitioner will review your document, your resume, to ensure that you do meet those qualification requirements. Now, once you are if you are amongst the best qualified candidates, let's say there are 20 people who are deemed best qualified, those names are referred to the hiring manager for further consideration. So it is not the norm for a hiring manager to be able to interview 20 people. And so typically what happens is the hiring manager will have a panel of individuals who are what we call subject matter experts in that area to review the resumes of all the best qualified candidates, and trust me, there's a process that happens behind the scene that is very technical, that makes the process extremely fair, where they're able to narrow that number down. Maybe the hiring manager says, you know what, get this number down to 5 people so that I can interview 5 individuals, and I want the best qualified. And so based off of, they basically rank these individuals based on their application materials, and they refer those 5 people to the hiring manager. And then sometimes there's a structured interview process that happens. Again, that's determined by the hiring agency. But the main thing, folks, is that resume. Your resume has to you have the skill sets and experiences to perform well in that position. And that's why I always tell people, we give you the answers to the test. It's on you to write the paper, okay? So the answers to the test come from that job announcement and that occupational questionnaire. So then you have to formulate your paper, which is your resume, and incorporate that information to tell your story of how you have this experience and how you have used these skill sets. Katika, if I send you this handout, are you able?
I did. I just put in the resume handout. So if you check the chat box, the resume handout that Deshaun mentioned earlier is in the chat box for you.
Great, thank you. And also, folks, after today, after this session, if you still need information related to the resume and information related to the hiring process, please just go back to USA Jobs, go to the Help Center, that you have a help tab in the top right-hand corner of USA Jobs. Excuse me, type in resume, and it gives you all the information that you need. They even have, it breaks it down for you on the type of information that's required, how to write it, all that kind of good information is right there for you.
I'm going to upload. A couple of people don't see the handout. I'm going to upload it again. It's in the chat. So you want to click on the chat box on the bottom and open up. And my name is Katika. And you should see that it's posted there. And oh, wait, that didn't work. Let's try this again. There you go. We had a couple of questions about online assessments, which I know is not technically resume based, but it's related somehow a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you those. And the first is, how does the online assessment affect the hiring process, and how long does it stay on your record? And if you don't know, I can answer it.
You said, how long does it stay on your record?
It doesn't really stay on your record, but so there are different online assessments that you'll take. And if that specific online assessment, you can only take once every 12 months. So like if there is, let's say you're applying for supervisory program management positions, and when you apply to the first announcement in May of 2022, you have to take the online situational judgment test, supervisory situational judgment test. You're going to take it. It's going to give you a score. If in August you apply to another supervisory program management position and it also requires that assessment, you won't be required to take it again. It's going to get your score from the last time you took it, and you'll use it, and they'll use that score for the next 12 months. So whatever you score in that assessment will be your score whenever that specific assessment is required for other announcements for 12 months. So if the first time you took it was in May 2022, for the entire until May of 2023, you won't be asked to take it again if it's required for the announcement. But in June of 2023, when you apply for another, if you're still looking and you apply for another announcement and it's required, it'll let you take it again. I hope that answers that question. And then the other one was about assessments. Is there a way to find out how you did on an online assessment? We don't release the scores from your assessment. Basically, if the announcement requires you to complete an assessment in order to make it to the next stage in the process, if you don't pass the assessment and that was the only thing you needed to do to get to the next stage, then the fact that you didn't progress may be an indication that you didn't pass. But generally the assessments are not pass fail. It's a score, but the score is not released. And then the next question is more okay, here's another question. What format does the HR specialist use to review the resume? Do they print or export from USA Jobs, USA Staffing?
They said what format do they use to review?
I guess they're asking, how are they reviewing your application? Are they printing it out? Are they exporting it from USA Staffing? And I think the answer is it depends.
Yeah, that's
It-
going
yeah,
to be up to
depends
the
on-
agency.
Yeah, that's up to the agency, right? And some specialists, I mean, like me, when I was reviewing applications, I would print them off because I read better with hard copy. I hate reading stuff on the screen, so it just depends.
Okay. All right, so I don't really have any more resume questions filtering in right now. So can we transition to more general questions? I know we're
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, let's go
Yeah,
ahead
go
and go
ahead.
into our wrap up.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna just do the catch up for any questions that we've gotten so far that we might not have been addressing when the person asked the question. And hang on just a second. So here's a resume question. Where's the best place to put awards on the resume? Bullet format under the related job or under job related skills?
If you're using the resume builder, it actually has a place where you can actually put awards decorations and additional information. So it's pretty much where you following the resume builder, it will tell you exactly where to place everything as you go through this process. And again, that's one of the things where when Deshaun was talking about it, using the resume builder is a great tool to actually make sure that you're following rules and you're not having to figure out where to put stuff. Stuff is actually say, hey, put this here. If you have publications, they have a place to put publications at. If you have a place that you have speak a foreign language, they have a place to put that at. So there's a place to put everything. So it's just a matter of following the guide that's given you, the guide that is given you, and putting the information in accordingly and as concisely as you would as you're building your resume.
All right, so next question. Any opportunities for federal service for spouses of retired military, or do I have to apply for opportunities via general public?
Unless the retirement wasn't due, if it was not due to a disability, then correct, that you would need to apply under open to the public. I think that's how it is, isn't it? Ain't that what it's called? Open to the public?
Yeah, or all your citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any truth to the idea that some resumes are reviewed using a program that searches keywords rather than actual HR specialists reviewing the qualifications?
So that's a
Reviewing the
huge-
resumes for qualifications.
So that question comes out up a lot, folks. If you are to that best qualified category, I can assure you that a human being is reading your document.
Yeah, we would consider that to be a myth, right, Deshaun?
Say again?
That we would consider that to be a myth.
Yes, a myth. Yes,
There's no
ma'am.
machine, there's no secret
Right.
words that jump off the page. It's like, you know, it's what you say you've done. How well have you did it? How long have you did it?
Next
Right.
question. Does the hiring manager receive the resumes for everyone referred, or is it names only provided on the certificate?
It's on the certificate, but now a hiring manager can also say, you know, and not select from any particular certificate and say, okay, well, give me another one. But no, they don't get to see everybody who applied. You only going to see individuals who were referred and are on your selection certificate.
All right, I may have to answer this next question. I applied to an accepted service appointment position, Schedule A. How long do I have to wait before I'm converted to the competitive service? And where can I find additional information on accepted versus competitive appointments? So if you were appointed under the schedule, well, so first of all, let me tell you, there are many Schedule A appointments. One of them is the Schedule A appointment for people with disabilities. That particular Schedule A authority, if that's the authority that you applied under, if you applied for, then if you're selected under that authority, you serve 2 years in the accepted service, and then you're eligible for conversion to the competitive service. Now, there are other Schedule A authorities. For instance, attorneys are hired under Schedule A authority. And when you're hired as an attorney under Schedule A, you stay in the competitive service for your entire career. There is no conversion. There is some information about accepted versus competitive appointments on USA Jobs, and I will put that in the chat in just a moment. Let me read another question, and while they're answering the next question, I will go get that link for you. And where's my next question? Just a second. Someone's asking, what is FASCLASS? I heard it helps with resumes. It is confusing. I don't know what that is.
It is.
I don't know. I've never heard of it.
I never heard of that.
Never heard of it. In other words, leave it alone. Take advantage of our free sessions.
I'm sorry, I lost my next question. There's a lot of questions here. Okay, this is probably for you, Michelle. I'm currently working at DOI as a federal employee, but we got an assignment for Germany and PCS in June. I applied for a job in Germany, but I am worried that I will get rejected because we don't have actual orders. I did submit the email for the projection stating the location and time frame. Will that mess up my chance?
Okay, so I'm glad this question came up. Positions overseas, most positions overseas are not in the competitive service. They're in the accepted service. And I can now speak from experience. So as a military spouse overseas, you are able to be hired because you're actually hired into a local, in a local national position, meaning there wasn't any US citizens over here, and because the jobs overseas specifically are for local nationals unless it's been deemed only for a civilian, and 9 times out of 10, that will be within DOD. So you would definitely need your orders, but I would not disencourage you from submitting an application. I submitted, before I left Germany, I submitted 30 applications before I got back to the States. And out of those 30, I got 1 hit. I was ever so grateful. So I would definitely say, although you don't have your orders, there's a way, still apply, But now if the announcement opens and you still don't have any orders and you still can't submit anything, then they might consider you not to be eligible. But to me, there again, you should have them, especially if you're already, once you get to Germany. So either way it goes, you're going to have your orders. But I guess I see you're trying to apply ahead of time. I would just say, explain the situation. Nothing hurts.
Okay, and I'm not sure if we answered this one. We might have had a similar question. My husband is 100% disabled through the VA, but he received his 100% after he retired. Am I able to use, they said spouse preference, but why don't you talk about whether or not they'd be eligible under the Military Spouse Authority?
Probably not under the Military Spouse Hiring Authority, because there again, the reason of that 100% disability has to be the reason why that member either was retired, released, or discharged, depending upon the branch of service, depending upon the characterization. You know, it might be a retirement, it might be a discharge, it might be a release, but it had to be based on a 100% disability. So if your disability was at 100% after the fact, then that's where the snag is going to come into play, which is unfortunate. It's just the way that the statute is written now. And hopefully, you know, that will change. We have alerted Congress, you know, that based on the way it's written, that category is going to be very few. So just trust and believe. We know, I mean, I do, Deshaun, Adrian, this is our program, so we know much about it. And because I'm specifically write the regulation, things that come into play is what changes it. But that factor there of having the 100% disability on the date is currently right now, yes. If it was not on the date and afterwards, I can easily see a HR specialist saying, no, you're not eligible. And not being eligible and not being qualified is two different things. Didn't say you wasn't qualified, because we haven't even gotten to that point. You've not met the basic minimum requirement for eligibility, which is that 100% disability had to be the reason and had to be given prior to the individual leaving, not him getting the 100%, the member getting the 100% after the fact.
All right, next question. Well, they wrote a salary needed under the job announcement. I think this came in when we were doing resumes. So I guess on your resume, do I have to list my salary when I list the position?
No, I'm sorry. No, you do not have to list your salary if you do not want to disclose your salary.
But I would highly encourage you to do so. Because if you're not a current federal employee, okay, so how are you going to prove that, you know, your SF50, your grade level? If you're trying to get into the government, you don't have to. But there again, that salary and what you're saying you're doing at what level could also be beneficial to you, the applicant.
And just keep in mind, I've seen that a lot where people would leave their salary off, and that's fine. But just understand that I'll give you a good example. So I was working at the government printing office, and we had advertised a librarian position. And I offered a young lady a job at a GS-12 and told her whatever the salary was. And let's just say it was $68,000. She had not included salary for any of her previous positions, and she was currently unemployed. Well, she said that she wanted to be considered for a higher salary, and I told her that she needed to provide me with her most recent pay stub, and I would talk to the hiring manager. Well, that's when I learned that she was unemployed. And so from that, we insisted that she take this step one, which means the lowest pay at that grade level, because she could not demonstrate to us that she actually made more than $68,000. So essentially she had a $68,000 because she wasn't making any money. And so to Michelle's point, if you indicate on your resume what your salary is, what the federal government does, while we typically don't negotiate salaries, we may be able to bring you in at a higher step than you would normally come in to try to get you as close as possible to your current salary, if that makes any sense.
Okay, and the next question.
Hey, Katika, before you answer, I'd like to go back to the one question that somebody asked, what is FAST class? FASS class. I kind of looked it up real quick. It is a repository for the United States Army that they can actually go in there and find civilian job descriptions. But what I also posted in there is our occupational handbook that we actually use that actually has all the that we utilize in the federal government when you're looking for jobs, and that will come closer to actually describing what the job is and what you could be doing in the federal government if you wanted to refer to something. Because again, if you're looking for just an Army position, that may be a great tool to use just for the Army. But there's a lot of jobs that are outside the Army that incorporate the Navy, Air Force, the Marines, and outside of those areas that is not going to give you those job descriptions, where the occupational handbook that we actually have will provide you that information. And it's general information, but it gives you information about the occupations that we have in the federal government and the specific, and it breaks down some of the key duties, roles, and responsibilities you'll have in that job. So if you wanted something like that, that's something that would probably be better for you than to just go to FAST class and look at just Army, unless that's all you want to look at it applying for is Army positions.
Next question. What if the salary doesn't match the locality though? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Meaning the applicants, what if the
if
applicant
you're
salary doesn't match?
Oh, so if you're saying, my guess may be that maybe they're saying whatever they get paid, maybe they're in the private sector, right? And so, or they're work for a nonprofit, and what they're getting paid is less than the locality, the total salary, including locality pay for that location. How would that affect the pay setting? Again, it's like what Deshaun alluded to. Basically, if you're applying for a GS-12 position, I'm going to offer you, as an agency, I want to get you in at the best rate I can. And for me, the best rate I can is the least expensive rate. So I'm going to offer you step one.
Right.
If you have pay stubs that show that you're currently making more than whatever that step one salary is, the agency may be able to, if they want to, offer you a higher salary, but they can really only do that if it's to match what you're currently making.
And also
folks,
add,
please don't.
it has to be in the vacancy announcement.
Right.
So you can't just do, because that wouldn't be a fair principle to you. So yes, you can do it, and it can only be done on the first time you come into the government. And
Right.
It's actually a superior qualifications appointment, which is very specific. But it would be in the vacancy announcement to alert all applicants, because it wouldn't be fair if, well, okay, well, Michelle wants to negotiate her salary and I really want to hire her. And yes, I could do this, but what about all the other applicants who probably would want to do the very same thing? So just want to stress that it's possible, but it is at the discretion of the agency. And it would
Please
be
please mute yourself. We can hear somebody's child.
all participants, please be muted. Someone's not muted. But I just want to stress that that is at the discretion of the agency. And there again, we use merit principles. And that is something that definitely would need to be in the agency's vacancy announcement.
Right, and that's what I was going to say, Michelle. Folks, please don't get the impression that you could just say, hey, I want to negotiate my salary. It is a rare occasion that you're able to do that based on, like Michelle said, the superior qualifications. Maybe there's a position that's really hard to fill.
And it's
in the
for
federal
mission
government,
critical
and you-
positions too.
and-
Yes, Deshaun.
Right, and you have a very specific skill set that we rarely come across. Then the agency will be more willing to negotiate with you with regards to that higher step. So just, we want to be clear, this is not a normal practice, so.
And as an example, I can give the one occupation that I can think of right now as an example would be nurses.
Right.
Anything
Right.
in the medical profession,
Yep.
anything in IT, anything in cybersecurity. When you do your research and, you know, once you apply to a job, I would highly recommend that you also do a little bit of research on that agency. So you can answer those questions that you need to, you know, I'm not going to say if, I'm going to say when you get the opportunity to interview. And that will be, you'll discover that through doing your research on that particular agency.
Next question. Can someone explain the option to late file for a position that is closed using VEOA as a spouse?
Okay,
To
well,
apply-
VEOA, spouses
apply-
don't get to use VEOA.
Yes, they do.
They
will
sure
use-
do. I'm so sorry.
Actually, they will, you have to apply under
And VRA.
VEOA. You have
Mhm.
to be eligible for derived preference. That's where you would actually utilize your derived preference, where you'll be given 10 points if you qualify. And what you would have to do to qualify for that and meet all the eligibility requirements for VEOA is that you would have to contact the agency, let them know that you're applying under VEOA, derived preference, providing proof that you qualify for derived preference, and ask to be put into the mix for that position. Again, you will be given 10 points, depending on where you would be, how you would grade out of that, but that does not guarantee you to be hired into that position at all.
And
that's the
that
key
is
thing.
outside of this hiring authority.
Yes.
That's why I was just a tad bit confused on the question,
Yeah.
which
So-
means it is not a non-competitive
Hiring
authority. And with the spouse applying, you will be applying under competitive procedures
Yeah.
because you're taking that military member, you as the spouse have incurred it if that military member cannot use it or is no longer here. So that's what gives you that derived preference. But I just want to state that is not what we're talking about. It's totally
Non-competitive.
different from this hiring authority.
Yeah.
Next question. You spoke about not disqualifying yourself earlier. Sometimes the questions in KSAs are very specific. Say I have equipment processing experience on my current agency system, but the KSA asks if I have processed equipment on their agency specific system. Do I say I have that experience?
So that question comes up a lot. If so, keep in mind, folks, these are human beings behind these questionnaires and what have you, and sometimes there are errors. So if you have a question like that and it's asking about an agency-specific system and they have advertised the job outside of their agency, if you are an expert, let's say you're an expert in performing all of those duties on a different system, then put your level of experience because there was an error when somebody created that questionnaire. But that's, again, it sounds like somebody just made a mistake because they cannot ask you agency-specific questions if the job is outside, they're advertising outside of their agency. They should not ask agency if you have experience on agency-specific systems.
All right, next question. Do you foresee more roles within HR being available to apply for in the near future?
There are a lot of HR positions out there right now.
Mm-hmm. HR is actually a mission critical occupation.
Yeah.
What does area of consideration mean in applying for a position?
Area of consideration, folks, that goes back to that the section on the job announcement that says this job is open to. Those are the groups of individuals that are being considered for that position. So if it says military, it could say military spouses, individuals with disabilities, We can say veterans and what have you. That's the area of consideration.
So I'm going to paraphrase this question. So the person basically, at one point in time, they were a GS-12. They left federal service. They came back as a GS-11. And they now want to know, can they apply for GS-13 positions? Let's just say for this example, I worked as a GS-12 for 2 years. I left for 6 months. When I came back, the only job I could get was a GS-11. But since I worked as a GS-12 for more than a year, can I, even though I am in a GS-11 position, can I apply for GS-13 positions?
Yeah, there's no reason why you can't, because you did meet the time grade requirement at the GS-12.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as long as you met the time and
You can
grade at that
demonstrate.
12.
Right.
The key thing here is going to be, though, when you apply for that job, generally on the application, it's on the announcement, it's going to tell you to provide your most recent SF-50. You're going to provide your most recent SF-50 so they can see that you're in the competitive service. But I also need you to submit your SF-50 showing you served 52 weeks at the GS-12 so that they
Correct.
then know you've actually met time and grade. Because if you only supply the 50 at the GS-11, the HR specialist, even though your resume says that, she can only go based on the 50s. She's going to look at the 50 and say, oh, they don't meet time and grade.
Right.
But you're going to need to provide those additional 50s to show that you meet that eligibility requirement. And I think we've caught up on most of the questions. Let me just roll through here. As a spouse of a 100% disabled veteran, am I considered a military spouse?
Say that again.
As a spouse of a 100% disabled veteran, am I considered a military spouse?
No.
The status is never on my, if so, the status is never on my SF-50. And so can you answer this question for two perspectives? The first is, are they considered a military spouse for the military spouse hiring authority? And then let's also talk about whether or not they might be eligible for veterans preference, for derived preference.
So for this hiring authority, the non-competitive appointment of military spouses, the 100% disabled veteran must have had that rating at the time they left the armed forces. That makes you eligible for under this hiring authority in the category, because there's 3 categories. Category for the spouse who have active duty military, the category for the spouse of the 100% disabled. That disability has had to occur at the time the member was released, retired, or discharged, and then the spouse of the unremarried widow or widower of a military member who deceased while serving on active duty. So for eligibility purposes, yes, you are a military spouse if you meet those conditions for this hiring authority. But a military spouse is a military spouse. So even if your military member has retired, and you may not be eligible under this hiring authority, the non-competitive hiring authority, you may be eligible under derived preference, which is what Adrian mentioned just a few minutes ago. But that means you are applying under competitive procedures. Remember what I said, this is the non-competitive appointment of certain military spouses. As a military spouse, if you don't meet these conditions, for this non-competitive hiring authority, but you have derived preference because that military member can't use it, has not used it, that's when your derived preference was come into play, and you would compete with other veterans. So that's, again, it doesn't mean that you would be 100% selected, because now it's a matter of all veterans that's going to be on this competitive cert whom the selecting official has to contend to. And I have to contend, if I'm not mistaken, Well, maybe not. Well, it depends. And it depends if it's category rating, because don't I still have to continue with the first three, Katika?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have derived preference, that's going to be XP. When I put you on, so when you apply to the all US citizens announcement, veterans preference applies. And what happens is we determine who's going to be in that best qualified category. That's the top category. And then we list all the applicants by veterans preference order, and we list our 30% or more disabled veterans first.
Mhm.
Then we would list our derived preference, our 10-point preference eligibles, and our sole survivor preference eligibles. So it's possible that I have derived preference, I made it into best qualified, and I can, as a manager, I just have to pick a preference eligible before a non-preference eligible. So if I've got 3 positions to fill and I have 5 positions, 5 people in my best qualified, I just have to, and 4 of them are preference eligibles. As long as I pick 3 preference eligibles, I can pick any 3 I want. So maybe the disabled veteran is more qualified than I am, or maybe the TP preference eligible is more qualified than the derived spouse. So another veteran might get selected. So it really just depends on who is in the applicant pool. One thing, and I don't say this to discourage you, but one thing you need to remember is that for any given application that you're applying for, you may be one of 10 or 15 applicants, but you could be one of 100 applicants. And in some positions, especially if the announcement is only open for like a week or 4 days, you are probably one of 1,000 applicants. And I don't say that to discourage you, because I just don't want to give you the wrong impression that, when you're applying for jobs, you're only ever competing against 5 or 6 people. That's not really the case. Oh, wait, we got a couple more messages here. So how do I know which hiring authority was used to get me hired? I'm eligible under more than one authority.
So you will know based on the type of vacancy announcement you applied to.
Right.
If you applied to a vacancy announcement and it was open to military spouses, current and former federal employees, and some other categories, then you're going to be hired what we call under merit promotion procedures. If you are using derived preference and you are a military spouse and you can have eligibility under both, then you would know, because you will be applying to a vacancy announcement that was open to US citizens. That's the competitive process. So how the agency is advertising is how you know what hiring authority is going to be used.
And also once you get appointed and you start in your agency, you're going to get a document. It's called a standard form 50. It's a documentation of personnel action. When you get that SF50, you probably get it probably about a month after you've been at work. You can ask for a copy of your SF50. At the top of the SF50, in one of the boxes on the top, it'll say which hiring authority was used to appoint you. And so if you got selected using your derived preference from an all US citizens announcement, it'll list a certificate number.
Correct.
But if you got selected from the non-competitive announcement as a military spouse, it'll say, I don't remember how it's coded. It'll either say
it's going to cite the actual hiring, this hiring authority, the actual reference in the Code of Federal Regulations is 5 CFR 315.612. 5 CFR 315.612. So that will be on your SF50. And if that is reflected as the legal authority, then you know that you was hired under this non-competitive hiring authority.
And you can also just, once you get on board, you can ask the agency. The HR person will be able to tell you. Sometimes the hiring authority may get referenced in your final offer letter, especially if you get hired under a hiring authority like the Pathways Recent Graduate or the Pathways Internship authority or the Schedule A authority for persons with disabilities, it might be in your offer letter because there are conditions about that, about those and those hiring authorities. You spend some time in acceptance service before you go to the competitive service. And sometimes we explain that to you in an offer letter. So either the offer letter, your SF50, or just ask the agency and they can tell you which hiring authority they used. There was a question earlier, I can't find it, about the person had either a master's degree or a PhD and they wanted to know what grade level to apply for. Again, look in the job announcement in the qualification section. It's going to tell you, what you need to qualify at each grade level. And so if you can use education to qualify, it'll tell you what degree level qualifies at which grade level. So that's something to look for there.
And normally that's going to be, and it is unfortunate, and I don't want to say all the time, but with the degree, with your PhD, the highest to get to the 14, 15, you're going to need also experience as well. So unlike private industry, and this is what I want to fall back and ask Deshawn on, because I could have sworn that using your degree and experience, you can do a combination of both, but nothing after the GS-12, there's no degree that is going to get you to a 13 or a 14.
Correct.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I think, and it really depends. It's also going to depend on on which occupation you're in. So,
correct.
So it depends. I'm going to put a link to the OPM's general qualification standards that are available on opm.gov. You can look at that information to help give you an idea based on the type of work that you would be doing with that degree. I hope that will sort of answer your question. Give me just a second. Let me get grab that link.
And now, because we're where we're at, you don't even have to, as far as your SF50, each employee, you can go into EOPF, which shows the history, your federal history, all your SF50s will be in there. I did see someone ask, is there anything to help identify how to read your SF50? And there is. It's on OPM's website. And I want to say it's in this, isn't it in the standards, Katika?
I don't know. I will go look for it. And give me just a second.
I mean, like years ago, we made it real easy because on the back, the instructions to read your SF50 was on the back. You could easily be able to read it, but that's when, before the national systems came, and this is back when you was giving an actual hard copy of a SF50.
Yeah, hang on. All right, I am going to send a link to, at opm.gov, we have a blank SF50, and the second page of that PDF, it explains what all of the boxes are on the SF50. So it's just a blank SF50, and you can use that second page to help you figure out what all the different boxes mean. There we go. So someone's asking if they can use military spouse preference for multiple positions, and we can't talk about the military spouse preference because that's a DoD program, but can you talk about, can you apply to multiple positions at the same time based on your mil spouse eligibility?
Yes, you can, but I would encourage you, remember, so currently right now, if you've already used it, if you are not the spouse of an active duty military member, then you can only receive one permanent appointment under this hiring authority. And in doing so, if you are applying to multiple positions, it really is going to depend which job you accept. Because if you're not the spouse of an active duty military member, and you applied over here at OPM, but you took a job at State Department. Okay, fine, wonderful. I'm so excited. But there again, we definitely encourage you to apply to as many positions as you can, but that's going to be a judgment on your part. So if you've already accepted, but then another offer comes in, as long as you've not reported, you've not EOD'd, you've not raised your hand, you've not been sworn in, then it's a possibility you can negotiate and, say no to the first offer and take the second one that comes in. But remember, once you accept and you are a federal employee, and let's say they were different grade levels, you took the 11 because that offer came first, but you really wanted a 13 because I was qualified for a 13 too. Remember, let's not forget about time and grade. Once you become a federal employee, and your time and grade is going to be applicable. I hope that kind of answered the question.
So, someone asked about getting a copy of your SF50s. I'm going to send a link to an FAQ that has information about that for you. So let's see. Oh, here we go. Do National Guard ADOS, I don't know what ADOS stands for, or AGR, active duty military spouses accepted for this program?
And it depends on the definition, and that I would have to verify. I don't want to give erroneous information, but it depends on the definition, because if National Guard is identified as Title 10 under the Armed Forces, and if you still meet the definition of active duty, then that's what would have to.
I think an AGR would.
So
if you're an
AGR is
AGR,
active
you would.
duty.
Yeah, you would be active duty. I don't know if National Guard is active duty, an active duty equivalent.
Right? So, right.
Yet they would qualify if they're an AGR.
Okay, so my point is, yes, I'm unsure about the National Guard. Just like earlier, if you are a reservist, the only time unless they're reservists or when that reservist is called to active duty, then those spouses at that point, that's your opening window. But if they're not, if the reservist is not on, off, we're not talking about the weekends that they do. I'm talking about call to duty, deployed in a way. That will be your opportunity, because that is when you will become eligible, because now your military member is on active duty status.
Right. And that's the same thing with AGR, because AGR, those are National Guards people, and AGR is active guard reserve. So yes, they are active duty.
I found another question I missed before was, does every resume go through Philadelphia?
What's in Philadelphia?
Well, so the answer is no. So what I want to remind people is that OPM provides USA Jobs as a platform for agencies to post your announcement. USA Jobs is the government equivalent to Indeed or Monster. So everything that's in that announcement comes from the hiring agency. Sometimes the hiring agencies pay OPM to post the announcement for them and help them make the qualifications determinations. So where in the world your application goes to be reviewed depends on the agency that you're applying for. OPM has a reimbursable services office that has an office in Philadelphia, and agencies contract with that office to have that office post the announcements for them. And basically all OPM is doing is processing the announcements based on the agency's policies. It is always the agency making the determination about whether or not you're eligible for a position or whether or not you're qualified. It is not OPM. Let's see. I'm just scrolling through to see what other questions I may have missed. Deshaun or Adrian, do you want to go over again searching by location? We've got a couple of questions they're asking about specific positions in specific locations, but if you want to explain that again.
Yeah, on the USA Jobs homepage, it's on the landing page, you can do a keyword search and or location. The location, you can just type in city and state, or you can just type in a state, and those jobs that are available will populate. But I, again, encourage you to use the filters that are on the right side of the page to kind of narrow your search down to meet, certain criteria like, are you willing to travel? Are you looking for full-time, part-time? Things of that nature. They're pretty self-explanatory, but you can do a search for jobs at a specific location, specific area, I should say. So yes, and that again, you'll see that as soon as you log on to usajobs.gov, you'll see it right there. And if you give me a second, I have my USA Jobs up and I'll share my screen very quickly so you can see it. I think we have time for that. So
we have time for that.
Okay. This is the one, and share. Okay, so as you can see here, can you see this?
I can. Yes, I can.
Okay, so folks, here at the top of the page, let's say I'm looking for, I'll say a program manager position, and I could say Nevada. Okay, and you could do your location, and what populates is jobs that are in Nevada, and it's 100 jobs. But like I was saying earlier, you come over here to the right where you see the different filters. And so if you're military spouse, you're looking for those positions. Oh, why is this slow? So now we're down to 41 jobs. So as you apply different filters, this number of positions will change based on just that, the number of positions that are available. And you have more filters over here. You might, if you only want to see remote jobs or exclude remote jobs, whatever positions, anything related to travel, again, that number changes. So and what you see at the top in these gray boxes are what we call those filters that I just included: Nevada, military spouses, and permanent positions for program manager positions. So yes, you can definitely search by location. Just type in the location at the top of the page, and those jobs will populate for you. Okay.
Okay. So this is a more general question. It's about pay. Can you include your yearly consistent bonus in your salary, or is salary just that, salary only?
Salary only because bonuses are not guaranteed and they're not consistent. So your salary is what you want to include.
Just scrolling through, trying to check my list to make sure I answered most of these questions.
Hey, Katika, I saw a question I don't think we addressed, and this starts with, I am both a military spouse and a veteran, receiving disability at more than 30%. Should I submit proof of both, or to assist in getting a federal position, or just veterans preference? And this goes to which one. Writing your resume is the first step. You have two different programs that you can actually apply under. You can apply under Military Spouse Hiring Authority if you are still married to someone that is in the military, or you can apply under Veterans Preference. Understand, the Military Spouse Hiring Authority is a non-competitive hiring authority. So you submitting your stuff about Veterans Preference will not be applicable in that manner. When you're applying for Veterans Preference, you want to make sure that you have your proper documentation that says you're a 30% or more veteran. Make sure that information is uploaded and apply for veterans preference that is not going to be in the non-competitive hiring authority arena. So when you're looking to, you have to remember there are two different hiring authorities. One is veterans preference, which is in the competitive service, and you have the non-competitive hiring authority of a military spouse that you want to apply under. Again, different documentation is going to be required for each one. So making sure that you have the documentation. And that goes back to what we talked about reading the job announcement. If you're applying under veterans preference, they're going to list all the documents that you need to actually apply with and have in your job when you're applying for the job. When you're doing military spouse, they're going to list all the documentation you need to have as a military spouse to apply under the non-competitive military spouse hiring authority. So you can apply two different ways. But you have to remember, veterans preference is not going to be applicable to a non-competitive hiring authority when you're applying under that military spouse hiring authority.
We've got a So we've just got a few more minutes left. I don't know does anyone want to do any closing remarks while we wait to see if we get any new questions in?
We can go ahead if we don't have any more questions, because we just really appreciate all of you guys' time, and just the mere fact that you sat here with us this afternoon. I just want to personally say thank you, and don't stop. Don't stop. Keep applying. Send us your questions in both Adrian, our earlier presentations that I do believe are in the chat. You have the email inquiry box. So anything that we might not have gotten to that you might have asked today, we certainly appreciate, again, your time, but we're always here. Myself, Deshawn, Patika, Carol, we are your OPM team, and we are just excited that you even came in and we were able to give the information that we did. So thank you so much. We appreciate you guys, and keep applying. Military spouses rock, and you can show them just that.
Absolutely. And I'd like to thank you all as well. Just be mindful, folks, that, it's very competitive out here. And, just like Michelle said, keep applying. Because you can't get frustrated, and addresses the requirements of the job, and put your best foot forward, because sometimes that resume is the only thing that they have to go by. And so that represents who you are as a potential hire. So take your time when you're applying for these jobs. Ensure that you are submitting all the necessary documents and what have you. And just don't stop. Like Michelle said, you all rock. I think
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So utilize the resources that we have available, and don't forget, go on USA Jobs and look at the event section at the bottom of the page. Agencies are always posting free events. My team is going to be doing public sessions again on resume writing, interviewing, navigating USA Jobs. So hopefully we'll have those posted in another week or so and start up in November. Take advantage of all of these free resources that will help you all navigate this process. And we're very passionate about it.
I put a link in the chat to the USA Jobs events page. You can find lots of good information. Agencies advertise job fairs, but they also offer advertising information sessions and like writing a federal resume, navigating USA Jobs. So you can find lots of good information on that events page. And
kind of one last thing from my point of view, I truly, again, appreciate each and every one of you. And one of the things we're trying to do in the Veterans Program Office is actually get back out to some of the family support centers and do some of these events live and in person. Although we live in the DC area, I think a lot of the individuals on this platform today may be in the area. And there's enough bases around here that can keep us all pretty busy going out. If Deshaun and Michelle, you want to volunteer? Come on. We can come out
Of
and do
course we
this
can.
live and in person.
Absolutely.
But would love
Absolutely.
to come out as we continue to get back out into the world and actually doing this stuff, come out and do it live and in person. A lot of times when I did it before, we did it on a weekend, so it freed people's time up during the week that they can come out on maybe a Saturday afternoon and take advantage of this information. And we could take our time in doing it and do a little bit more in-depth information gathering and information exchange instead of just doing a quick hour and a half and out of there. Actually sit down and go through some things with you, hands-on, do a little bit more hands-on training, kind of like a workshop, and do it a little bit more in depth than just the 2 hours here and then out of there. So again, I want to thank each and every one of you out there. If you have questions and you want any of the presentations, please let us know, and we'll make sure that we can get that information out there to you in a timely manner. And you, again, being a veteran, like they said, I know the frustration that comes with it. I truly know the frustration, but it's just one of those things that if you sit down, take the time and really take stock in you, write out some of the things you've done. You've probably done remarkable things, but because you've been told to shrink it down to 2 pages, you've cut things out. Now it's time to reverse that and let those things come back out and actually put that information in there and really make yourself shine. This is your masterpiece. This is your, you're telling your story. So tell your story in a way that somebody's going to say, wow, I need to talk to this person. So each one of you, thank you again for taking the time. And I just took us to 4 o'clock. So you know what, guys, we can go. It's that time of the day. So I appreciate each and every one of you ladies and gentlemen out there. Thanks again.
Thank you.